President Cyril Ramaphosa is among them, the mourners today in London with other heads of state, and it's an opportune time to bring in Professor Anthoni from Nieuwkerk. He's with the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs, that's at Unisa. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. Let's begin with whether it is absolutely important for President Ramaphosa to be at the funeral today for the bilateral relations between Pretoria and London.
Yeah, so good afternoon, Mbeki. Thank you for the invitation. Remember now that President Ramaphosa was on this tour to America to meet President Biden. That was an important bilateral, I would say. And of course, he aimed to stay on to attend the United Nations General Assembly opening in September. It's traditionally where all the heads of state make a brief 3 to 5 minute input and giving a perspective from their country's perspective. And so whilst this was planned and he did meet Biden, I think it was quite important, and we've had that coverage. The Queen then died and the funeral was arranged for today, and I think the calculation was for President Ramaphosa to attend the funeral for 3 or 4 reasons, which we can unpack in a minute. But I must say that it's become quite controversial. By the way, I didn't see him in the audience, Mbeki. Did you see him? I couldn't spot him on the TV.
No, I wasn't able to spot him, but I think I saw the International Relations Minister, Naledi Pandor, but I could be wrong. But I think that's who I was able to catch as the various heads of state and their delegations were making their way into the hall.
Yeah, I was keen to observe that. And also, who else? I mean, it's quite a spectacle. It's unbelievable to imagine that almost, except for 7 or so heads of state, everybody else clamored to be in London today. And so the calculation was that Naledi Pandor, our foreign minister, will go back to the UN to represent South Africa on the United Nations General Assembly platform, which is quite important. And then all of this has become very controversial, not only for political and ideological reasons around, the British imperial and colonial legacy, but should our president be attending a funeral in a faraway country, in a distant land, when here at home things appear to be falling apart, especially with electricity and energy?
And the relationship itself with the monarchy, how important is it to fruitful relationships between country to country? Because yes, the monarch is head of state, but not head of government. So why not just build a relationship with the Prime Minister of the day, for instance?
Yeah, no, your question is absolutely spot on. I think the personality and the presence of Queen Elizabeth and her long reign was of such a nature that she played an important bridging role, if you want, in trying to keep things together. What I mean by that politically, not at home, because her family itself, became embroiled in many controversies. But politically, her role on the global stage was to keep the Commonwealth together. So that's the former colonies and territories, as King Charles now calls it. We are his subjects, or many are his subjects. Mm-hmm. And so her role was to ensure, because she reigned for so long, many colonies became independent in the 60s. And she her personality was such that she was able to help bridge and assist where necessary. And so for that reason, it was important, for politicians to make sure that you yourself just said, it's unbelievable now to think that President Zuma had more than one audience with the Queen. So she bridged political and ideological divides. Now the question is, and it behoves, I think it's just mature of all of us to bow our heads and pay respect for the passing of such an important world figure, the likes of which we haven't seen since the passing of Nelson Mandela, our former president, I would say. Now the question is, there's King Charles III, and the question is whether he would be able to play that role. And I can tell you now that he won't. He will probably oversee the the sun setting on this last part of the British Empire. And in fact, I do think that the Commonwealth is in trouble, because now that glue that's held it together, that charismatic figure has disappeared. He is not charismatic. He is not a visionary. I think he's very bureaucratic, stifling, following the rules. And so it's the generation after him that will bring normality, I think, to the relationship. So in all, I think it's important for President Ramaphosa to be there today, because behind the scenes and on the sides of all of this pomp and circumstance, this beautiful ceremony, really, very impressively organized, is the ability for him to talk to a number of Commonwealth leaders about pressing global international matters.
Right. Just on that then, how useful and how relevant is the Commonwealth when you consider that much of what happens there is, as you were saying, conversation, not necessarily binding. You may choose to go in the direction of what was discussed there, or simply do it your way, ultimately.
Yeah. No, I mean, Mbeki, as you can hear, I'm not in favor of us remaining a part of the Commonwealth. We've got a long association with the Commonwealth. We were there under apartheid. We left. 1994, we came back. There was a role for us. It was a time when Thabo Mbeki was the president. Africa's Renaissance was on the agenda. And the Commonwealth could have been a dynamic platform to address global change. Now I'm doubtful. Let me tell you what I think is on the agenda. I think it's important for President Ramaphosa to talk to fellow Commonwealth leaders and the others that he find in London and have time, because it's quite a crowd, I must say, is the whole issue of climate change and the money that we need to make this transition to green energy under conditions of a war in Ukraine, where energy has become a crisis and food insecurity has become a huge crisis, impacting particularly Africa. And so it makes sense for me to think that he would be able to talk to movers and shakers to say, look, in Africa, we have pressing needs. Can we draw up an agenda? Can we talk about it? And it's good for me to think that he can use one day to deal with this, because, and let me be cynical for a minute, he comes back to Johannesburg and Pretoria or Cape Town 24 hours from now. How is he going to address the Eskom crisis? He's been there since 2013, heading up all sorts of crisis committees, and people are cynical about his particular role. Clearly, what we experience now under load shedding must be a whole of government or a whole of society approach to begin to solve the problem. So yes, he can coordinate, he can call people, he's a convener, he has the power as the president. But that balancing act, looking at the interests of Africa, that also impacts on South Africa, and at the same time domestic politics. It's a fine line, but I think he's managing it.
I was looking at a tweet earlier from one of our viewers asking, don't we have other news to talk about in South Africa? Is there something to that question that requires unpacking? Should all of us, sitting all the way in Johannesburg, Pretoria, East London, Durban, Cape Town, Mthatha even, should we be paying as much attention to this as we are today?
Okay, that's quite a challenging one, Mbeki. I think that question was meant for you, but my own view is, my own view is that, look, it's an event of global significance. The fact that the president is there and not in Mthatha is also important for us to unpack, to critically analyze, and to understand. Yes, it is the news item of the day. We have to talk about it, but let me put it maybe in a different way. When Cyril Ramaphosa returns from London and from distant lands, we want to see him on a platform. In fact, that family gathering that he used to give us under COVID, he needs to address the nation to tell us where we are. And I think he must allow journalists to speak on our behalf, to say, look, what have you achieved? What is it that you sought to do in America and in London? Give us that feedback. We want answers now. And in that way, he will address the credibility gap that is rapidly developing between him, the ANC, and the people at large.
Prof, can I ask you to just hold on for me, because I think they're just coming up, this procession, to Wellington Arch at London's Hyde Park after leaving Westminster Abbey quite a while ago, in fact. This coffin carrying Britain's Queen Elizabeth being drawn by members of the Navy by hand, not horse carriage. Behind them are members of the royal family. We've been reflecting just now about the relationship between South Africa and the United Kingdom. No doubt other countries doing the same today. The military has been front and center of events as we've seen them today, as have been members of the Church of England, because Queen Elizabeth was the head of that institution, and many have spoken about how dear her faith was to her. Some heads of the church even recounting personal interactions that they had with her as a member of the congregation, even though a royal seat was saved for her in the church. But she often enjoyed, they say, a one-on-one moment with the priests of the day, where they would talk about her favorite hymns and perhaps the day's reading. Let's pause here for a moment and we'll speak to the Prof a bit more after this.